Welcome to the Council for a Parliament of the World's Religions webinar series. I'm Amelia Perkins. I serve as the Council's Director of Special Projects. Today's webinar welcomes Reverend Dr. Ishmael Noko, coming to us from Cape Town, South Africa. Dr. Noko is the recently retired Secretary General of the World Lutheran Federation, based in Geneva, Switzerland, the representative body of over 70 million Lutheran Christians worldwide. He's served in that capacity for 20 years. Originally born in Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe, Dr. Noko has returned to Africa to empower the interreligious movement to address the significant challenges facing the continent. Toward that end, Dr. Noko founded IFAPA, Interfaith Action for Peace in Africa, which over the past 10 years has brought together leadership from Baha'i, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, and African indigenous traditions to work on a wide-ranging set of issues, from conflict resolution to poverty alleviation to the empowerment of women. The work of IFAPA was honored with the Carus Award for Outstanding Interreligious Achievement at the 2009 Parliament of the World Religions in Melbourne, Australia. Dr. Noko and other members of IFAPA were on hand in Melbourne, with a $100,000 prize in support of IFAPA's work. There will be a conversational style to today's webinar. Joining in on the conversation is Dr. Paul Wee. Dr. Wee is presently an adjunct professor at the Elliott School of International Affairs at George Washington University and pastor of the Oromo Evangelical Church in Washington, D.C. He was Assistant General Secretary for International Affairs and Human Rights of the Geneva-based Lutheran World Federation from 1986 to 1993, and Program Officer for the United States Institute of Peace in 2006 and 2007, working primarily on interfaith conflict resolution in Nigeria and Colombia. Welcome, Paul Wee, and welcome, Dr. Ishmael Noko.
Thank you, and thank you very much, Amelia, for your very elaborate introduction, and thank you, Paul, for being on the available for this conversational presentation. I have to begin by saying that I'm in South Africa right now, in Cape Town, and it's winter, and I'm just facing the end of the world here, where you can see dimly Robben Island, where Mandela spent many years and his colleagues arrested and separated from the rest of the community. I'm glad to greet you all, the listeners, and I will begin now by indicating to you that Interfaith Action for Peace in Africa, which has the acronym IFAPA, was born out of a very specific need of Africa. And that need is shrined or expressed in the words stability and peace. Africa was in need of stability and peace. These two are key to development and the future of Africa. And I would say also the future of the rest of humanity. A quick view probably will help those who are not familiar with IFAPA, or Interfaith Action for Peace in Africa. Let me say, from the perspective of IFAPA, we began to come together in the year 2002 after a long process of trying to find a way of bringing Africans to come and speak about themselves in a way that will be qualitatively different from any other time. We gathered after that period of from 1998 until the year 2002 in the city of Johannesburg. We were about 100 religious leaders representing, as you have heard from the presentation earlier in the introduction, the Jewish community, the Christians, Muslim, Hindus, Buddhists, Baha'i, and the African traditional religions. So in other words, IFAPA is deeply rooted and engaged in the grassroots communities of this continent. We met to ask a very simple question that any African would need to ask themselves or to be asked by others. The question was simply, why is Africa in a mess? Why is Africa in a mess? The why is Africa in a mess? We began to struggle with that question because the image, as most of you know, the image of things African was not a good image. Poverty was looming and still is to this day. The gap between those who have and those who don't have, and those who can read and those who cannot read, was widening. Dictatorships were the order of the day. Refugee populations were crossing borders without invitation, were enormous. And the root causes for refugees' situation in Africa were quite known and very disappointing, because the root causes were, a majority of them were within Africa itself. The economic and political institutions had failed or were continuously failing. So we gathered to ask the question to ourselves, and we got the answer, and the answer was simply this. We as religious leaders have contributed to the mess in which Africa finds itself in today. We did not, of course, say we are totally responsible for the mess in which there are other external factors which are responsible for that situation in which we find ourselves, but we wanted to own that part which is ours and speak about in a way in which we had never in the past spoken about it. To cut a long story short, after 4 days, we emerged with a document or two documents in part 1 and part 2. That one document, part 1, was a declaration. We called it the Johannesburg Declaration. It was a declaration committing ourselves as individuals and also as representatives of religious communities from which we came to work together around a common value. And that common value were identified as peace. Why peace? Because every religion speaks as its own center as peace. So peace became the rallying value around which we committed ourselves as individuals, and also as representative of those communities we represented in the Johannesburg meeting of 2002. We called for cooperation rather than competition among religious communities. Africa has known nothing but competition among religious denominations or communities. We recognize also on that occasion, through the declaration we made, that not a single religion can claim to be total, as we have been doing, to be total and to own the truth totally, without understanding that the truth is always in pieces. The truth has always been in pieces, and one community holds another piece. So when we come together, peace becomes more visible and more practical and more whole. We also committed ourselves during the declaration that we shall replace exclusion by cooperation and respect for the others' religious traditions and beliefs, recognizing that their religion is valid as they see it valid. We did not define what was valid religiously and what was invalid. We shied away from that and respected that we have to understand each religious community as it understands itself. So that was the action we took. We made a declaration. The declaration was we are going to cooperate among ourselves. We have to recognize each other and respect one another and find a way of working together. The second part of that document, part B, was a plan of action. Talking among ourselves, we recall again and again that Africans are sometimes described as people who can, in many words, say commitments or come to make commitments, but not keep them and not do anything about it. So we drew a plan of action that was very concrete about things we are going to do as translating our commitments into very concrete actions. We began by taking actions of trying to register the IFAPA as a body for these religious communities within Africa. Now, as we talk now, The IFAPA is represented in many countries. The many councils, where there are councils of interfaith existing, we do not establish any. We work through those organizations in each country or in each context. In other countries where there is no interfaith religious communities, we try to establish new ones. That we do. Nairobi is the seat of IFAPA, and there is a program for the young people which is in Uganda, and there is an office in Botswana. There is a registration in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. There is an office or registration in Senegal, and we are going ahead in registering places where there are no interreligious councils. So out of this plan of action, we made it clear to ourselves that we are going to intervene in areas where there is potential conflict. We try to scan Africa and to read the map of Africa as closely as possible, realizing where there are conflicts beginning at a very early stage. We would try to intervene by sending delegations or holding consultations or having contacts between opposition parties, liberation movements and guerrillas, and the ruling political parties, to try to bring an understanding between those who are elected or who fail to be elected in public offices. We established contact with very high-level political prisoners. For Africa, it became important. We have many heads of states and heads of governments who are today living in exile or have been living in exile for a very, very long time. We tried to establish contact with them in order that we could begin a process of reducing the possibility of confrontation and tensions in their own countries. We again met in the year 2005 as a summit again of 250 representatives from 47 countries of Africa out of the 52 countries or 53 countries of Africa represented there. And we have since that time taken very concrete programs, especially with women programs, because in order to translate peace, we have discovered, as most people have, that women are very instrumental and very key in the building of networks for peace. And so there are networks of women programs and conversations within the continent of Africa. In some instances, it is important that we develop a project or a program around which people will work. Now, those programs that I'm talking about are programs that are interfaith. We don't just participate in a program for the sake of providing programmatic activities or assistance to an area in need, but we ensure that those are the areas where there is a quality added to that, and that is in the interfaith element in all that. So we have had a water project in Mombasa, where it brought together the religious communities of Rwanda after such a devastating genocide, which most of you know about. So the Rwandese today, as we talk, in a village that has about 50-something thousand people, were provided with a water system that was provided through the Interfaith Action for Peace in Africa. The idea is to bring about collaboration and cooperation between the two Muslim and Christian communities of Rwanda. Just to give another example, we have recently in March this year, just during the week of the International Women's Celebration Recognition, dedicated a water system in Mombasa, outside Nairobi and the city of Mombasa, out in the rural areas where there are Muslims and Christians. We've been living together, and we realize that there is a need for collaboration in that area in order to ensure that conflict in Kenya, as you know, that Kenya has been embraced by conflicts, that people can work together and Mombasa is a good example, and it's marvelous, and I can tell you stories after this Mombasa experience that that area, as far as I'm concerned, there will never be tensions between Christians and Muslims. Or if there's tension, it can never be made by those who are seeking power, be translated into Christian and Muslim conflict. Ishmael? The other way in which we have planned to nail down the seeds of peace is through the youth programs. Across Africa, we have a network of young people. As we talk now, they are planning an activity around the Great Lakes of Africa. Some of you know Burundi, Rwanda, Uganda, Tanzania, and those countries around the Great Lakes. They have gone through their own experiences in the past, where tensions are very easy to light up. So the young people are hoping to gather around the Great Lakes to harvest in a conversational way the experiences of those young people around the Great Lakes. I hope that in that consultation we shall also have the participation of those in North Africa who have gone through their own difficulties, so that they can hear from the young people within the communities of the Great Lakes of Africa what the experiences are in that sharing of experiences, and how they've managed to be where they are today in the Great Lakes, how the healing process around the Great Lakes has taken place. So that those who are coming from Egypt, coming from Tunisia, those who are coming from Libya, I suppose, will be participating, hopefully, and that will be a new thing in which they can connect. Now, in order to do all this supervision of the activities of action, putting action into the words, or putting our words into action, the IFAPA has appointed a commission of 30 people, drawn strategically from the sub-regions of Africa, and including 2 non-African commissioners representing the global community outside Africa. So this is a body that regulates, and that meets annually, to take into account what the plans of IFAPA are, how they are being translated into concrete action of peace. Next year it will be 10 years since IFAPA was formed, and you may be aware that it's not easy to come together in a continent as ours is. Africa is a vast continent, very religious continent, but many religious communities, religious traditions. All of the 7 religious traditions I've mentioned, 6 of them are all coming from outside the continent of Africa. Only the African traditional religion are the indigenous ones in Africa. So in order to build a community that will intervene in matters of peace, out of these 6 coming from outside and 1 from within the continent of Africa, it's a tremendous amount of work. We have spent now 10 years, solid next year, 10 years, before we started any form of dialogue. What we have been doing during the last 9 years was to build a high level of confidence among these religious traditions, which has taken its own time, and we thought that we should gain our only capital that we have is confidence and trust. Once we build to the level where we can begin to discuss those issues which are difficult to discuss, you can always rely on the level of trust that we've built that is going to hold up and assist in the conversation. So next year, we are beginning a new phase, phase 2 of IFAPA work, and that is going to be marked by dialogues. There will be several tables of dialogue, and some of these tables are around the question of the discussions with the business community of Africa. IFAPA has recognized that we will never be able to build Africa or bring bridges and peace in Africa unless and until we realize that we are not the only players on the scene. There are many stakeholders. If I use the language of the civil society, there are many stakeholders, and the stakeholders are, in this case, the private sector. And the second, the players are the civil society. And the third group comes from those we call parliamentarians, those who are elected to public office to lead the nations, the parliamentarians. And I'm very careful not to say the political parties, whether it's opposition or ruling, but parliamentarians are the ones we try to draw into a conversation and build up a table around which we can discuss the future, the stability and peace in Africa. It's one such dialogue that is going to be taking place. There is other dialogues also at the level of the civil society, as I've said, dialogue with the parliamentarians. There's a dialogue also on some of the resources of Africa, which are the basis of tensions, and that is the rivers and the waters of Africa. Africa is blessed with many rivers, but unfortunately, the mortality rate of African rivers is incredible. It's just incredible. Rivers are dying every year. We lose a number of rivers, and normally we don't think about rivers as dying, but they are dying. And we need to understand the whole question of the environment, whole question of climate change. It's part of the picture here that I'm talking about. We are focusing religious communities to think and to understand these issues as vital and part of peace, because the resources are becoming scarce and we worry about that. You're all aware that Sudan has become two countries, one in the north, one in the south. I want to underline the fact that we should not forget that there was one country out of which two countries have emerged. Southern Sudan is the one that capital is Juba, and both Northern Sudan and South Sudan share a river, the River Nile. And we're concerned that there could be peace between Northern Sudan and Southern Sudan. The two countries are now struggling to establish diplomatic relationship with countries around them. And they have also struggling to establish diplomatic relations between the two countries now, which have been one country all along, of course, with the strife all along for about 20-some years. So Sudan is uppermost in the hearts of many Africans today. And we hope that with both Sudans, IFAPA's experiment of trying to build bridges could be put in place without delay. We are planning, hopefully, that we can look at the strength of the religious community, especially the area of education. Education is very important, and I hope that we can build and support the educational systems which will bring about better understanding between the students in the Northern Sudan and Southern Sudan. I need to point out also in the area of Mother's Cry, we have a program called Mother's Cry for a Healthy Africa. This program was initiated as part of the plan of action. Plan of action of trying to translate what we say into concrete actions. The Mother's Cry for a Health is a campaign. We say the mothers of Africa are crying, not just those who are dying out of disease, but the whole continent of Africa is not healthy. The wellness of Africa is uppermost in their campaign. You also should know that the water project that I've described earlier on are part of the intentions to strengthen that program of Mother's Cry for a healthy Africa. Any questions?
Can I interrupt?
Yep.
Ishmael, this is Paul. Ishmael, thank you very much for this introduction to IFAPA, Interfaith Action for Peace in Africa. And I must say just at the beginning in my response to you, and I can maybe get your reaction, I am totally amazed at what you've been able to manage in 9 years. I think this water project you talked about near Mombasa, I've just seen the film clips, but you get goosebumps when you know that these women don't have to walk 10 kilometers to get water anymore. I mean, it's really amazing, and thanks to you for your ability to build trust with people. Let me just ask this question. I mean, yes, you're there in Cape Town, looking out over the Cape, and the image of Robben Island there, and that, of course, is a dramatic picture. But it also indicates that at the heart of many conflicts there is issues of justice and injustice. There's a struggle of people for rights and dignity and the feeling of self-worth. I remember your role in altering the apartheid system. I mean, you and the LWF, Lutheran World Federation, the World Council of Churches, they played, I think, a major role outside and inside. But there, the key words were not stability and peace. Those were basically not good words because people realized that if you wanted stability and wanted peace, you might get the status quo, which was, of course, unacceptable in this society dominated by legalized racism.
Mm.
And I'm just not sure whether stability and peace are the words for the future either.
Mm-hmm.
But perhaps you could comment on that.
Yes. First of all, go back to the women in Mombasa. Those who have seen the clips about, it took us about 4 years to agree on 3.5 years to come to an agreement as to where and I'm talking about women themselves, because as you saw, it's an interfaith. It's not just one group, but an interfaith group, to select the spot where the water is going to be drilled. It's a lot of conversation that took place until there was an understanding. And after that, we had to find the resources for that. Much of it was done very inexpensively. It's a project that should have cost us $400,000. But let me tell you, you won't believe that when we tried to mobilize people, because we discovered also that our resource and our capital is nothing more than people. These men and women of Mombasa rose up to the occasion and accepted to do certain things on their own. They had the expertise. Some of them, their own sons and daughters who were qualified engineers and water engineers. They came forward, and it cost a total amount of $33,000. Now, from $400,000 to $33,000. That means they pumped in their expertise, and we had one of the best water systems in that area now, which is providing water. Right now, they're trying to connect the mosque with water, and there'll be water in front of the mosque, where the religious rituals will not be possible. Next to the clinic, next to the school, next to the church, next to the hospital, the clinic rather. All these things will be connected now with the clean water. And the women who were living at 4 o'clock in the morning, we had stories after stories that the husbands of these women were now beginning to doubt if there really is a question of water. Because the mileage they had to travel, the school children had to travel so many miles in the morning from 4 o'clock before they went to school at 8 o'clock. And this has brought about a transformation in terms of when the religious community, we went there to hand over this project, we had a dedication. We consecrated the water. And I'm using the word consecrated deliberately here. To say there was a prayers offered by the religious communities, different traditions, standing together in one place. We don't pray together. We pray in one place. That's a very big distinction we have made, because we had some struggles about, are we going to be praying every morning we start our meeting, we start with prayer. Now, are we praying together? We said, no, we're not praying together, because we know that there are maybe some ecclesial and theological problems for others about what prayer means. But we say we are praying in one place. So since that time, IFAPA begins its daily meetings with prayer at one place. So I would say more, I could say more also about the Rwanda water, which was a transformative. Now, to do it this way, when the water is dedicated by the religious representatives, you also overcome the perception that this water is given by a particular religious community to evangelize or to win others, to make the numbers more greater on their side. Now, this has been completely eliminated in this particular case of Mombasa and Rwanda. Now, with respect to the question of justice and the question of stability in the future, within stability and peace, we are discussing questions of justice. That's why we have included the parliamentarians. You know, we just think that the time has come. In our declaration, you can find the documents. In our declaration, is that we have said there is nobody who can import peace from outside into Africa. We have to begin to nurture the nurseries for peace are within the African continent. And the seeds and the soil has to be African and there. So that's why we're bringing in parliamentarians to speak with them, and they will speak to us very frankly and honestly. We have always avoided to speak. We have elected our parliamentarians to parliament, and after that we're afraid of them. That is over now. We have to speak together for stabilizing peace so that the business women and men, those who are doing agriculture, who intend to feed their families, can do it in an atmosphere of peace. So it's a question of justice. Whether international justice or local justice, international justice questions arising, yes. The question of elections are very important for us. We discussed those under this context also. You know, we have elections after elections where the winner takes all in some instances. In some instances, those who lost the election, the following day they begin to sabotage the results of the election and so forth. Or the elections have been denied in some countries that I don't have to name here. Elections have been conducted. The results have taken 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 months to announce because something has gone wrong in the processing of it. So yes, I think justice questions, we are not blind. They're central to the discussions, and injustice central to our conversation around the tables we are going to create now is beginning next year. And now your question about stability, and so I think the words, however we use them, it depends what content you put in those words. Now, let me add, Paul, because I think your point is very important. Once upon a time, when we talked about a businessman and a businesswoman in this continent, and especially in the country where I am right now, in South Africa, we were talking about Caucasian or European or somebody coming from outside the continent. Today, the businessman and the businesswoman is an African. We are taking discussions with them that we have to stabilize, and if we are able to make profits, we want to remind the business community that we, as the society, we are the ones who allow them to make profit. We allow it. So if they can listen to a dialogue, we have to engage in dialogue with us, then we have to talk about what is a healthy business community. We're eager as African religious communities to promote a decent business community here, if I may say so. So we can't do that unless we really face the issues of justice, fairness, and responsibility for the society.
Thank you very much for that, Ishmael. Let me just pick up on your initial comment when you talked to African religious leaders and said, listen, we're responsible for what mess there is here. And I think that is a very a rare but very authentic word. Of course, we all know that some of us in the North Atlantic didn't help matters any. Through the long years of colonialism and underdevelopment of Africa, we contributed to making the situation very, very difficult. So, but I think that you begin with this point of let's not push this on anybody else. We have to take responsibility. I think that's a very, very healthy thing. But let me ask, in the case of Rwanda now, whereas you're very well aware that churches, less I think the Muslim groups, but the churches and its leadership did not play a helpful role at that point. And this only highlights the importance of the Interfaith Action for Peace in Africa. But my question is this. In order to prevent genocide in the future, is IFAPA taking any action or working on the question of what has sometimes been called humanitarian intervention? I know that we've got the example of Libya right now, and all the ambiguities are coming out. But the responsibility of the international community to prevent the massacre and genocide of innocent people seems to be a major challenge for the international community so that this does not happen again. And part of that begins with the confession, of course, of our own failures in the past. Is that on your agenda?
Yes. Actually, when the commission was launched in the year 2006, we went to launch it in Rwanda, and assisted by the president of the country, the president of the Republic of Rwanda, and a number of diplomatic representatives from various countries which are accredited to Rwanda or to Kigali, and the cabinet ministers participated in that. And we made a commitment also on that occasion that we hope that never again shall it happen, that kind of a genocide, to take place under our watch, when Africa is under our watch. Now, it's a very ambitious statement that we made. It needs vigilance and also honesty that, of course, is a task. But nonetheless, we went to launch this specific commission meeting that we are in the heart of Africa. Rwanda is geographically located in a very special part of Africa. And we want to get, there's a symbolism. The message out of this symbolism to the rest of the world and to ourselves is that Rwanda is in the middle. It's a small country, but the worst thing is happening in that country. We hope that does not happen when we are responsible. So we have put that on the agenda, and we invited the African Union, was represented, the African Parliament. I hope that most people are aware, like there is a parliament for European Union. We have an African Parliament which is meeting in Midrand, in Johannesburg, just outside, between Johannesburg and Pretoria. There is a House of Parliament for Africa. The president of the House of Africa was present at that. So we made a commitment to all of us, including parliamentarians of Africa, the religious communities, and the members of the cabinet of the government of Rwanda at the time. We are, in terms of humanitarian, we have not built up on that one. Now, it's good you asked, because I should have told you earlier on that we are planning to have a committee on humanitarian issues. A committee on humanitarian issues, we were struggling with the term, how to get the appropriate word. If you are a group of Christian churches alone, you talk about diaconia. But diaconia is a vocabulary that is used within a specific religious community, which is Christian. But the humanitarian, I think, is cuts across. So we are looking at the committee on humanitarian that is going to work around these things, so that we can begin to work also in that area as interreligious communities for humanitarian assistance and or issues. We don't think we've been assisted as such, but issues, to address those issues which are very important, and take this up with, yeah.
Let me ask the military question, because we realize that for something that's been called the military intervention for humanitarian reasons,
okay,
or humanitarian intervention, we're talking about under what conditions do military, whether it's Africa Union, ECOWAS, or NATO, or under what conditions is this justifiable?
Oh, forgive me.
And when should it, what are its limits, Emily? That is the big question.
Ishmael, before you answer, I just want to take a moment to let the listeners know that we also will have time to answer a few of their questions. So listeners, please type your questions into the box on your screen, and we'll get to your questions in just a moment. Sorry, please continue.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, Paul, your question I think is it's a very interesting, but of course, you know, it's a very complex question.
Right.
It's a complex question that is a second generation of the discussion from a just war theories to where we are now. As interfaith, we have not addressed that because you will understand we come from different traditions, and that's why we are appointing a committee for dialogues to clarify issues similar to this. When is war from other traditions? War can be done anytime, because if it's threatening, you know, well, Paul, you are aware that it's very complicated when we come to interfaith. That's one. The other thing is that complicates it is that interventions like we have now recently in North Africa, I mean, honestly, I'm quite concerned that the human beings were being slaughtered in Libya. A rebellion had started, and the war was internal conflict was going on, and we were worried that people are going to be killed so easily. But the complication now also that has come with the intervention of the European Union needs to be looked at, because it's not as simple as simply humanitarian. There are other factors that are complicating the whole issue. Absolutely. Now, as religious leaders, we have not dissected this and discussed among ourselves, because the things happen so early and so quickly. So I right now have no answer. I have only a personal answer, but I have no answer that represents the mind of IFAPA at this moment. I'm glad you asked it, because it's a question that we need to talk about. What do we understand by war in an interfaith context? How do we, even when we talk about a prophet, when we say prophet, what does it mean, a prophet? In the Christian tradition, in the Judeo-Christian tradition, and a prophet in the Islamic tradition, a prophet in the Hindu tradition, a prophet in the African tradition. So all these are issues that needs to be clarified through the process of various committees that I talked about.
Very good. Let me just throw this in, and other questions can interrupt this one. You know, the Parliament of the World's Religions that recognized the work that IFAPA has done, that you have done. I think that was just a beautiful moment at the Melbourne gathering. And I know we will have another assembly coming up in 2014 in Brussels. One of the major themes seems to be around that quote from Hans Küng, that there will be no peace among the nations without peace among the religions, no peace among the religions without dialogue, etc. Would you say that that is that IFAPA would agree with that? And how do you see the role of a more global organization with respect to concerns in Africa?
Well, I think IFAPA has right from the start indicated that we will limit our activities and our reflection and our scope first and foremost within Africa. Outside Africa, there will be no IFAPA, but there is Parliament. The Parliament of all religions is our Parliament. And we would like also to see the agenda of the Parliament being discussed as part of the agenda of IFAPA. In preparation for Brussels, I think we would like to see that happen more and more. At our next meeting, which we hope will be in Sudan, Southern Sudan next year, the 10th anniversary, and where we shall be launching what I said earlier on, hopefully, the various tables of dialogue and areas of concern. We hope that in that meeting, we can also have Parliament representatives participate, and that we can shape our agenda towards that meeting in the same way. So that in Africa, we could say one of the faces of the Parliament in Africa is IFAPA. And one of the global faces of IFAPA outside is Parliament. That's why I use the word is our Parliament.
Very good.
And so I think what you said, Paul, it's very important. We will be benefiting a lot from the discussions in Brussels. Really, the agenda is set now, is being developed, is extremely important. So IFAPA stands prepared and will be preparing itself to be a participant and also to contribute as much as possible, as humanly possible.
Wonderful.
Very good.
Ishmael, yes, and just know the Council of the Parliament agrees entirely, and you know, IFAPA is one of the great apples of our eye. We hold so much respect for the work you're doing. This question has come in from the audience. Dr. Noko, what was your role in convincing Charles Taylor to leave Liberia in 2003? And do you think that it was the weight of religious communities behind you that causes governments to listen?
Read that, the last part, read it aloud a little bit.
Do you think it is the weight of religious communities behind you, the fact that you are representing the diverse religious communities of Africa, that causes governments to listen?
Yes, if I understood the question properly, it's about Charles Taylor.
Yes.
And then there is a question. The second part of it is, do I have the religious leaders behind me in convincing?
Yes, and do you think the reason that governments do respond and listen to you in these various conflict situations is because you are representing
this community? Yes. Yes, I don't think I would, if I represented myself at all, I would ever make it. Maybe with one or two that I know, but yes, the very fact that I can say on behalf of the religious community, because they have made their mind on a number of issues which I'm able to speak on their behalf through the plan of action, through the declaration and plan of action, and other declaration, the Gaborone declaration, and where we met, we've had some declarations and decisions made on specific issues or questions of water. Yes, I have authority to speak on those. So now, regarding Charles Taylor, in the peacemaking processes, we are also very sensitive to the fact that when we meet with certain individuals, those who have been, who lost now in the position of responsibility and power, are in exile and are living in difficult situations because they don't have any power. We have held some discussions with them. So we hold those as pastoral responsibilities on our part. So I can say this, the certain amount, but I can't say all things here. I hope that the audience will appreciate that. Even Charles Taylor, I've been to see him on behalf of the IFAPA. We were 3 of us who were supposed to go, but the bishop and the sheikh from Liberia, Bishop Harris and the sheikh of the Muslim community, were not able to come because of visa problems which suddenly emerged, which I was very sorry about that. But nonetheless, I had to go and see him. But the contents of what we discussed, I classified as pastoral at this moment. And I would hope that you can understand that, you can appreciate that I did represent the religious communities faithfully. And Charles Taylor is still under trial right now. I should not say things because it might jeopardize the prosecution and the defense teams in The Hague. So there are protocols that must be kept out of these things. So it's one of those.
Thank you.
But I appreciate the question. I appreciate the question.
We have another question. Given the continuing patriarchal nature of many African societies, how crucial is the education of girls and the empowerment of women to the future of the continent?
Repeat that question. There is acoustics in the line here.
Given the continuing patriarchal nature of many African societies, how crucial is the education of girls and the empowerment of women to the future of Africa?
Yes, it is very important. You know, the Africans, they are patriarchal. Many times when I speak to my fellow Africans, and not only me alone, I think we have many of us who say the same thing, we remind ourselves that Africa has had queens. Women have been in very strong positions of power, and they were respected for that. We can't justify oppression of women on the basis of the African culture. It's not true. It's not true. We have abused the culture in order to oppress the women. But now we have to change that. I mean, it's every society. No woman is well treated in any culture in the world or in any nation. I've not seen any. But now I don't have a license to speak about other cultures. I can speak about my African brothers and sisters, that we really do not have a basis for oppression of women, because these women are just not women. They are our mothers, they are our daughters, they are our wives, our spouses, they are our sisters. So there's just no room for that, unfortunately. Or fortunately, there is no room for that. But it's unfortunate that there is this kind of patriarchal loading on women. And I hope that education that we are talking about will be essential for setting us free, all of us. I'm talking about men and women.
Thank you.
Ishmael, if I may say, I really appreciate what you have done on behalf of women in Africa, girls in Uganda, in the face of abuse. You're right. I mean, we have so many problems right here in the U.S. where I am right now. But that you address that problem as a top priority, I think that is new, and that is amazing.
Let's just, Paul, thank you for. Let me just, if you don't mind, just say, we have had the problem of female genital mutilation in one society, and as a man, I had to go there. Normally, it was not right. I sent women first, the delegation of women, a year before. The second year I went, I asked to speak to all grandmothers who are widows. As an African, I can speak to those because they are widows and they are grandmothers. And it was in that conversation that I can tell you what came out of that conversation was an eye-opening to me. And we took actions together with the grandmothers, and that female genital mutilation has stopped.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Today.
Fantastic. Could I ask a theological question?
Mm-hmm.
Unless there's another question. You said, as somebody who's worked in Nigeria with Christian and Muslim groups, I remember in the midst of massacres where Christians and Muslims actually prayed together, a pastor and an imam in the town of Kwandalimi and other places. Mm-hmm. A good imam friend of mine, I invited him, Muhammad Barash Arafat from Baltimore. I invited him to my little conservative Lutheran congregation here in Alexandria, Virginia, where I sit, and for a wonderful, wonderful evening. And you know, the image of Islam in this country, especially after 9/11, is so very poor. But he was enlightening, and then at the end he was asked to chant, and then he said a prayer, and everybody in this congregation was right there with him in this prayer. I guess my question is, I appreciate if, and certainly the Parliament is not throwing everybody into a big pot and finding the lowest common denominator. Rather, it allows every faith community to have its own integrity and its own respect. At the same time, I think if you're dealing with conflict resolution, especially you see it, that there is a place where faith traditions converge in their sense of a transcendent power, in their sense of the dynamics of healing that you have articulated, one of which is confession, and then forgiveness, like in Desmond Tutu's Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It may have had some Christian symbols there, but the dynamic to which it points goes way beyond Christianity. Or do you and IFAPA don't want to maybe go in that direction?
Well, I think I could say that, first of all, thank you, Paul, for that. The example you gave in Baltimore and the U.S., it needs to be told beyond where you are and be told also here. So we know, and it's good to know that these things are not just stories told in one corner of the world, where that it's important that we can take the North American story and hear it here, and hear it in Indonesia, and hear it in India. See, for the Africans, it's very important what we just said, because, as I said earlier on, our religions that are in Africa here, all of them came out from outside Africa, except the African traditional religion. I was in India last year, November, in the month of November, at an interfaith in Delhi, to ask them to send a delegation to come to Africa. And the reason I gave them was, there are two reasons why they should send a delegation to be at Mombasa meeting when we do what we are going to be doing as IFAPA. It was because when there is a fight, a tension in India between Muslims and Hindus over the site of the temple, it flashes in Africa immediately here. Muslims and Hindus are also intense here. When something happens in the Middle East, whatever happened between Muslims and Christians and some difficulties, it flashes on Africa. Africa is a flashing point for all these religious tensions. So we would loan your story here and retell it among ourselves to know that some good examples are taking place elsewhere. That Muslims and Christians don't have to. They can chant in each other's homes. And that's a milestone in our international relationships as well. Now, your second question or observation was to do with, Paul, I just forgotten. Could you remind me?
Ishmael, Paul, I hate to say that our time is up. The hour has gone too quickly.
Oh, my goodness.
Ishmael, just in one sentence, could you tell our listeners how best they could continue to be informed and connected with the work of the IFAPA?
Say that again. Could you ask a question? How?
Could you tell our listeners how best to be connected with the work of the IFAPA?
I think the best will be through the website. We are trying to upgrade our website because IFAPA really began to be on its own the beginning of this year, January. Lutheran World Federation has been the sponsor, so everything's sort of beginning this year now. So the website will be that source of information, and you can find the address there and write to any of the staff members or to myself. We will do everything we can, and we would be trying to produce more material which will be aimed at information, and the Parliament and us will try to talk about the linkages so that you can click on the Parliament and then you find your way to IFAPA website without difficulties.
Yes, and we'll also, the Parliament will send a follow-up email to everyone who's been on this webinar with information on the IFAPA website. So thanks so much to both of you. It's really been a lovely conversation. And
Thank you both, Paul and yourself.
Very much. Thank you.
And thanks to all of you listening and today and for caring about these issues. Just a few announcements. Please join us for our next webinar on Wednesday, August 10th at 10 a.m. U.S. Central Time, featuring Rabbi Alon Goshen-Gottstein, who will be joining us from Jerusalem to speak on equipping religious leaders with religious work. For more information, visit our website at parliamentofreligions.org. We also invite you to stay connected to the interreligious movement through our email newsletter and by visiting our social network at peacemaking.org. We have been recording the webinar today, and the recording will be available on our website within the next few days.
Yeah.
Okay. And just in closing, we'd like to know that the vision of the Council for Parliament of the World's Religions is of a more just, peaceful, and sustainable world. The mission of the Council is to cultivate harmony among the world's religious and spiritual communities and foster their engagement with the world and its guiding institutions in order to realize this vision. Since the first modern Parliament, the Council has creatively and concretely worked to link the interreligious movement from the local to the global, and we send our thanks to all of you who are doing your own work for a better world. Once again, on behalf of the Council, thank you for joining us today.